Three-piece dinner with biscuits. O'Malley! O'Malley! O'Malley!
Oh, yeah.
O'Malley! O'Malley!
What happens when raw talent meets perfect timing? What happens when a fighter's fists become weapons of mass destruction, turning every opponent into a stepping stone toward greatness? For Sugar Sean O'Malley, those questions had answers that seemed written in the stars, until they weren't. In the world of mixed martial arts, few fighters capture lightning in a bottle the way Sean O'Malley did. With his rainbow hair, flashy knockouts, and social media savvy, he didn't just fight his way to the top. He entertained his way there. He built a brand that transcended the octagon, turning casual fans into die-hard believers and skeptics into reluctant admirers. For years, it seemed like nothing could touch him. Every fight was a highlight reel. Every post-fight interview was a masterclass in confidence. Every prediction he made came true. But behind the colorful persona and knockout power was a foundation that looked unshakable from the outside, yet carried cracks that would eventually split wide open. This isn't just the story of a fighter who rose and fell. This is the story of how the very things that made Sean O'Malley unstoppable became the same forces that brought him crashing down. From his explosive debut to his championship reign, and ultimately to the moment when the magic ran out, this is the complete breakdown of how Sugar Sean O'Malley went from the most exciting prospect in the UFC to a cautionary tale about what happens when hype meets harsh reality. Chapter 1. The Montana Kid Who Dreamed Different. Sean O'Malley didn't grow up in a typical fighting environment. Helena in Montana wasn't exactly a hotbed for future UFC champions. But what the small town lacked in fighting pedigree, it made up for in providing the perfect backdrop for a kid who refused to be ordinary. From an early age, O'Malley stood out, not just because of his lanky frame or his natural athleticism, but because he carried himself like someone who knew he was destined for something bigger. His introduction to combat sports came through his father, who recognized that Sean's restless energy needed an outlet. The local gym became his second home, and it quickly became clear that this wasn't just another kid trying to stay out of trouble. O'Malley had something different. His hands moved with a speed and precision that caught everyone's attention. His footwork was natural, almost dance-like, and his timing, that crucial element that separates good fighters from great ones, seemed to be hardwired into his DNA. But what really set him apart wasn't his physical gifts, it was his mindset. While other young fighters were content to follow traditional paths, O'Malley was already thinking differently. He studied fighters like Anderson Silva and Conor McGregor, not just for their techniques, but for how they carried themselves. He understood that fighting was entertainment, and entertainment was power. Even in those early days, training in a small Montana gym, he was already crafting the persona that would eventually make him famous. The amateur scene became his testing ground. Fight after fight, O'Malley dominated opponents with a style that was equal parts technical brilliance and pure artistry. His knockouts weren't just victories, they were statements. Each one announced to anyone paying attention that something special was brewing in the mountains of Montana. By the time he turned professional, the foundation was already set. Sean O'Malley wasn't just going to be another fighter, he was going to be a phenomenon. Chapter 2. Breaking into the Big Leagues. The transition from regional shows to the UFC is where most fighters' dreams go to die. The competition is fiercer, the pressure is suffocating, and the margin for error disappears completely. For Sean O'Malley, his UFC debut on Dana White's Contender Series in 2017 wasn't just an opportunity, it was a coming-out party. Facing Alfred Kashakyan, O'Malley stepped into the octagon with the kind of confidence that either impresses or annoys, depending on who's watching. But confidence without backing becomes arrogance quickly in the fight game. O'Malley had the backing, the fight lasted less than 2 minutes, ending with a spectacular knockout that sent shockwaves through the MMA community. It wasn't just the power of the finish, it was the precision, the timing, and the way O'Malley seemed to predict exactly how the sequence would unfold. Dana White was impressed enough to offer him a contract on the spot, but more importantly, the MMA world was put on notice. This wasn't just another prospect with potential. This was a fighter who could deliver must-see television every time he stepped into the octagon. The knockout became an instant classic, replayed endlessly on highlight reels and social media feeds. O'Malley had achieved something that many fighters spend their entire careers chasing. He had created a moment that people would remember. His official UFC debut came a few months later against Terrion Ware. The pressure was different now. The bright lights, the bigger stage, the knowledge that millions of people were watching. Some fighters crumble under that weight. O'Malley thrived in it. The fight was vintage O'Malley, showcasing not just his striking ability but his fight IQ and adaptability. When Ware tried to pressure him, O'Malley stayed calm and picked his shots. When the opportunity presented itself, he took it with surgical precision. The victory wasn't just about adding another win to his record. It was about proving that he belonged at the highest level of the sport. The post-fight interview showed a fighter who wasn't overwhelmed by the moment but energized by it. He talked about his goals with a kind of matter-of-fact confidence that made believers out of skeptics. This wasn't bravado or manufactured hype. This was a fighter who genuinely believed he was destined for greatness, and he was starting to make other people believe it too. Chapter 3: The Knockout Artist Emerges. With his foot firmly planted in the UFC door, Sean O'Malley began the systematic destruction of anyone brave enough to stand across from him. His next opponent, Andre Sukumthath, represented a significant step up in competition. Sukumthath was experienced, durable, and known for his ability to drag fighters into deep waters. On paper, it looked like the kind of fight that could expose O'Malley's weaknesses and humble the rising star. Instead, it became another showcase for O'Malley's devastating striking ability. The fight was pure poetry in motion. O'Malley moved like water, flowing around Sukumthath's attacks while landing counters with pinpoint accuracy. His striking wasn't just powerful, it was intelligent. Every shot had a purpose, every combination was designed to set up the next. When the knockout came in the first round, it felt both sudden and inevitable. But it was the aftermath that really showed O'Malley's star potential. His celebration wasn't just about the victory, it was about the performance. He had taken a dangerous, experienced opponent and made it look effortless. The MMA community began to take notice in a serious way. This wasn't just another knockout artist who might flame out after a few fights. This was a legitimate contender with the skills and mentality to make real noise in the division. The Jose Alberto Quinones fight that followed was supposed to be another step forward, another opportunity to build momentum. Instead, it became a defining moment that showed both O'Malley's incredible resilience and his ability to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. Early in the first round, disaster struck. A leg kick from Quinones appeared to injure O'Malley's foot, leaving him hobbled and vulnerable. Most fighters would have looked to survive, to weather the storm and hope for a way out. O'Malley did the opposite. Fighting on one good leg, he continued to press forward, continued to engage, and continued to hunt for the finish. When he dropped Quinones with a beautiful right hand, despite being compromised, it wasn't just a knockout. It was a statement about his heart, his determination, and his ability to find ways to win, even when everything seemed to be going wrong. The victory celebration was muted by concern about his injury, but the performance itself had elevated O'Malley to another level entirely. He had shown that he wasn't just a talented striker who looked good against lesser competition. He was a fighter who could overcome adversity, who could adapt on the fly, and who possessed the kind of mental toughness that separates contenders from pretenders. Chapter 4: Building the Brand. While Sean O'Malley was demolishing opponents inside the octagon, he was simultaneously building something equally impressive outside of it. His social media presence became a masterclass in modern athlete branding. Unlike many fighters who treated platforms like Instagram and Twitter as afterthoughts, O'Malley understood their power and wielded them like weapons. His content wasn't just fight promotion, it was lifestyle documentation. Fans got to see behind the curtain to understand the person behind the fighter. His gaming streams, his training footage, his interactions with fans, all of it contributed to a narrative that made people invest in Sean O'Malley the person, not just Sean O'Malley the fighter. This wasn't accidental. This was calculated brand building that would have impressed marketing executives at major corporations. The numbers spoke for themselves. His follower counts exploded. His engagement rates dwarfed those of fighters who had been in the game much longer. Sponsors took notice, offering deals that reflected not just his potential as a fighter, but his value as an influencer. O'Malley had cracked the code that so many athletes struggle with. He had figured out how to turn athletic success into cross-platform stardom. His merchandise sales became legendary in MMA circles. Fans didn't just want to watch Sean O'Malley fight, they wanted to dress like him, to be associated with his brand. The colorful hair, the unique style, the confident persona, all of it created a package that transcended traditional fight fandom. He was attracting people who might never have watched MMA otherwise, drawing them in with his personality and keeping them with his performances. The Eddie Wineland fight in 2020 became the perfect intersection of his rising stardom and his undeniable skills. Wineland was a former champion, a respected veteran who had shared the cage with some of the division's best. For O'Malley, it represented validation, a chance to prove that his hype was backed by legitimate ability against proven competition. Chapter 5: The Veteran Killer. The Eddie Wineland fight wasn't just another step up in competition. It was O'Malley's audition for superstardom. Wineland had been fighting professionally since O'Malley was in elementary school. He'd faced killers, survived wars, and earned respect through blood and sweat over more than 2 decades in the sport. This was the kind of opponent that separates legitimate contenders from manufactured hype trains. From the opening bell, O'Malley looked like he belonged on the biggest stage. His movement was crisp, his timing was perfect, and his confidence was unshakable. Wineland tried to use his experience, tried to make it ugly, tried to drag O'Malley into the kind of gritty exchanges that had served him well throughout his career. But O'Malley was operating on a different level entirely. The knockout came with surgical precision. A perfectly timed right hand that connected flush and sent Wineland crashing to the canvas. It wasn't just the power of the shot, it was the way O'Malley saw it coming, set it up, and delivered it with the kind of confidence that made it look inevitable. The celebration was iconic, a moment that would be replayed endlessly and cemented O'Malley's reputation as one of the most dangerous strikers in the division. But the real significance of the Wineland victory went beyond the highlight reel finish. It proved that O'Malley could perform under pressure, that his skills translated against elite competition, and that his mental game was as sharp as his physical tools. The post-fight interview showed a fighter who wasn't surprised by his success but was clearly energized by it. He talked about title shots and championship belts with the kind of conviction that made people believe he could achieve those goals. The momentum from the Wineland knockout was intoxicating. Suddenly, Saun O'Malley wasn't just a prospect to watch. He was a legitimate threat to the established order of the bantamweight division. Fight fans began debating where he fit in the rankings, analysts started predicting his path to a title shot, and the UFC began featuring him more prominently in their promotional materials. Chapter 6: The Streak That Built a Legend. What followed was a run that cemented Saun O'Malley's status as one of the most exciting fighters on the planet. The Thomas Almeida fight showcased his ability to adapt and overcome adversity. Almeida was known for his aggressive striking and his ability to hurt opponents early. Instead of being intimidated, O'Malley used his range and footwork to neutralize Almeida's strengths while imposing his own game plan. The finish was vintage O'Malley, a beautiful combination that dropped Almeida and demonstrated the evolution in his striking game. He wasn't just relying on raw power anymore. His technique was becoming more refined, his setups more sophisticated, his finishing ability more diverse. The victory moved him closer to the top 15 rankings and generated serious discussion about his title shot timeline. The Chris Moutinho fight at UFC 264 became something entirely different. What was supposed to be a showcase turned into a war that tested every aspect of O'Malley's game. Moutinho, a late replacement opponent, came to fight and refused to be intimidated by the bright lights or his opponent's reputation. For 3 rounds, he pressured O'Malley, tagged him with clean shots, and forced him to dig deep in ways he hadn't been forced to before. O'Malley responded like a true champion. Instead of wilting under the pressure, he adapted his game plan, used his superior technique to find openings, and gradually broke down his opponent's resistance. The 3rd round TKO wasn't just about finishing the fight. It was about showing the kind of heart and determination that separates good fighters from great ones. The performance earned him respect from critics who had questioned his toughness and proved that he could win fights even when things didn't go according to plan. The Raulian-Paiva fight that followed was a masterpiece of precision striking. Paiva was crafty, experienced, and dangerous, but O'Malley made it look effortless. His footwork was poetry in motion, his timing was perfect, and his finishing instincts were razor sharp. The TKO victory was the kind of performance that makes highlight reels and creates new fans. Each victory built upon the last, creating a narrative that felt almost too good to be true. O'Malley wasn't just winning fights, he was dominating them. He wasn't just beating opponents, he was making statements. The combination of his skills inside the octagon and his growing popularity outside of it created a perfect storm that propelled him toward the top of the division at breakneck speed. Chapter 7: The Championship Moment. By 2023, the inevitable had become reality. Saun O'Malley had earned his shot at bantamweight gold, and his opponent would be the seemingly invincible Aljamain Sterling. Sterling was everything O'Malley wasn't, a grinding, relentless wrestler who had proven his championship mettle through adversity and controversy. The stylistic matchup was fascinating, pitting O'Malley's explosive striking against Sterling's suffocating grappling game. The build-up was electric. O'Malley had never been more confident, more focused, or more ready to seize his moment. His training camps had become legendary for their intensity and innovation. His team had studied every aspect of Sterling's game, developed specific strategies to neutralize his strengths, and prepared for every possible scenario. This wasn't just another fight for O'Malley, this was his coronation. When the moment arrived at UFC 292, O'Malley was ready. The first round saw him establish his range early, using his superior reach to keep Sterling at bay while landing clean shots. Sterling tried to close the distance, tried to get the fight to the ground, but O'Malley's takedown defense held firm. More importantly, his confidence never wavered, even when Sterling found the moments of success. The knockout came in the second round with the kind of perfect timing that had defined O'Malley's career. A right hand that caught Sterling clean and sent him crashing to the canvas. The moment the referee stopped the fight, O'Malley's journey from Montana prospect to UFC champion was complete. The celebration was pure emotion, years of preparation and sacrifice, culminating in the realization of a childhood dream. The post-fight interview showed a fighter who understood the magnitude of what he had accomplished. He wasn't just the new bantamweight champion, he was the face of a new generation of fighters who understood that success in modern MMA required more than just fighting ability. It required star power. The belt ceremony was iconic, a moment that would define his legacy regardless of what came next. Sean O'Malley had achieved what seemed impossible just a few years earlier. He had gone from regional shows in Montana to the pinnacle of mixed martial arts. The kid who dreamed different had made those dreams reality in the most spectacular fashion possible. Chapter 8: The Weight of the Crown. Championship success brought new pressures that Sean O'Malley had never experienced before. Suddenly, he wasn't chasing anyone anymore. He was the target, the man everyone wanted to beat, the fighter carrying the expectations of an entire division on his shoulders. The media obligations multiplied, the scrutiny intensified, and every aspect of his life came under microscopic examination. His first title defense was scheduled against Marlon Vera, a fighter who represented everything dangerous about the bantamweight division. Vera was experienced, durable, and possessed the kind of well-rounded skill set that had troubled many champions before. More importantly, he had a history with O'Malley, having handed him one of his few career setbacks years earlier when an injury led to a TKO loss. The preparation for the Vera rematch revealed the first cracks in O'Malley's armor. The training camps that had once energized him now felt like obligations. The media responsibilities that he had once embraced began to feel overwhelming. The constant pressure to maintain his image, his brand, and his performance level started taking a toll that wasn't immediately visible but was definitely present. During fight week, subtle signs emerged that something was different. O'Malley's usual confidence seemed forced rather than natural. His interviews lacked the spontaneous energy that had made him such a compelling personality. His team noticed changes in his preparation, small details that suggested the mental burden of championship life was heavier than anyone had anticipated. The fight itself told the story that everyone had been afraid to acknowledge. O'Malley looked technically sound but emotionally distant. His timing was still sharp, his power was still present, but the fire that had driven him to the championship seemed dimmed. Vera, sensing opportunity, pressed forward with the kind of relentless pressure that had defined his career. When O'Malley won a close decision, the victory felt hollow rather than triumphant. He had defended his title successfully, but questions lingered about his performance, his mindset, and his ability to maintain the championship level that had gotten him to the top. The post-fight celebration was muted, lacking the explosive joy that had characterized his previous victories. Chapter 9: The First Real Warning Signs. The victory over Vera should have been a celebration, but instead it became the moment when cracks in the foundation started showing through the surface. In the weeks following his successful title defense, O'Malley's behavior began shifting in ways that concerned those closest to him. Training sessions that once energized him now felt like chores. The gym, which had always been his sanctuary, started feeling like just another place he had to show up to maintain appearances. His coaches noticed at first. The razor-sharp focus that had defined his preparation was becoming inconsistent. Some days he looked like the same fighter who had demolished Sterling for the title. Other days he seemed distracted, going through the motions without the intensity that had made him special. The difference was subtle but significant for a sport where margins are measured in split seconds and millimeters. The media obligations that had once been opportunities to showcase his personality became burdens he openly complained about. Press conferences that should have been platforms to build his brand turned into exercises in patience for both O'Malley and the journalists trying to extract quotable material. His responses became shorter, less colorful, more guarded. The spontaneous confidence that had made him such compelling television was being replaced by calculated caution. Behind the scenes, his team was dealing with a fighter who was struggling with the weight of expectations in ways that weren't immediately obvious to the public. The pressure to maintain his image, his performance level, and his marketability was creating a perfect storm of stress that threatened to undermine everything he had worked to build. The joy that had once fueled his training was being slowly strangled by obligation and expectation. His social media presence, once a source of authentic connection with fans, began feeling manufactured. The posts were still there, the content was still being produced, but the spark that had made his online personality so magnetic was dimming. Fans started noticing the change, commenting that something felt different about their favorite fighter. The numbers were still strong, but engagement was declining as audiences sensed the shift in authenticity. Chapter 10: The Merab Dvalishvili Disaster. When the UFC announced that Merab Dvalishvili would be O'Malley's next challenger, fight fans immediately recognized the stylistic nightmare that was brewing. Dvalishvili was everything that had always given O'Malley problems magnified to championship level. Relentless pressure, cardio for days, and a wrestling game that could neutralize even the most dangerous strikers. This wasn't just a title defense, it was a puzzle that would test every aspect of O'Malley's championship toolkit. The build-up revealed more warning signs about O'Malley's mental state. His usual pre-fight confidence seemed brittle, more performance than genuine belief. Training footage showed a fighter who was technically prepared, but emotionally disconnected from the process. His team worked overtime to recreate the intensity that had defined his previous camps, but something fundamental had shifted in O'Malley's approach to competition. Fight week brought unprecedented pressure. Dvalishvili's team had clearly studied every aspect of O'Malley's game and developed a strategy specifically designed to exploit his weaknesses. The Georgian fighter's confidence was infectious, and for the first time in years, O'Malley seemed to be entering a fight as something other than the betting favorite in terms of momentum and psychological advantage. Chapter 11: The Unraveling. When the cage door closed at UFC 306, everything that made Sean O'Malley special seemed to evaporate under the bright lights of the Sphere in Las Vegas. From the opening bell, Dvalishvili imposed his will with the kind of relentless pressure that had broken countless fighters before. O'Malley's usually crisp footwork looked heavy, his timing was off by fractions that felt like eternities, and his legendary confidence appeared to crack under the Georgian's suffocating pace. Round after round, Dvalishvili dragged O'Malley into deep waters where technique meant less than heart, where star power counted for nothing against pure determination. The takedowns came easily, the ground control was dominant, and O'Malley's attempts to create space and land his signature strikes were repeatedly smothered by a fighter who had turned pressure into an art form. By the fourth round, it was clear that something had fundamentally broken in O'Malley's game. His corner's instructions seemed to bounce off him without registering. His defensive reactions were a step slow. The fire that had burned so bright for so long was flickering dangerously close to extinction. When the final horn sounded, O'Malley sat on his stool with the look of a man who had just watched his dreams slip away in real time. The decision was unanimous and undeniable. Merab Dvalishvili was the new bantamweight champion, and Sean O'Malley's reign was over after just 2 defenses. But the real devastation wasn't in losing the belt. It was in how he lost it. This wasn't a competitive fight that could have gone either way. This was a systematic dismantling of everything that had made O'Malley seem unstoppable. Chapter 12: The Aftermath That Nobody Expected. The post-fight interview revealed the true extent of the damage. O'Malley's usual eloquence was replaced by rambling explanations that satisfied no one, least of all himself. He talked about injuries, about game plans, about anything except the obvious truth that Dvalishvili had simply been the better fighter on that night. The excuses felt hollow because they came from a man who had built his reputation on owning his performances, good or bad. What followed in the weeks after UFC 306 was a complete collapse of the carefully constructed empire that O'Malley had spent years building. Sponsorship deals that had seemed guaranteed began evaporating as brands questioned whether their investment was still worthwhile. Social media engagement plummeted as fans who had once hung on his every word started looking for new heroes to worship. The psychological impact was even more devastating than the financial losses. O'Malley had always carried himself with the unshakable belief that he was destined for greatness. That belief had been his greatest weapon, the foundation upon which everything else was built. But confidence is fragile, and once it cracks, it's almost impossible to repair completely. His team watched helplessly as their once unstoppable fighter struggled with basic aspects of training that had previously come naturally. The explosion that had defined his striking seemed muted. His timing, once supernatural, became merely human. Most concerning of all, his desire to compete, the fire that had driven him from Montana to the championship, began flickering dangerously. Sean O'Malley's story isn't just about a fighter who lost a belt. It's about the crushing weight of expectations, the fragility of confidence, and the brutal reality that in combat sports, your next fight could be the one that changes everything. The kid who dreamed different had reached heights that seemed impossible, but sometimes the view from the top only makes the fall more devastating. And for Sugar Sean O'Malley, the fall was just beginning.